Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. We're going to be starting part 2 and reading chapter 8 in Beyond Religion by the Dalai Lama. So part 2, we're going to be talking more about steps that we can take to implement all of the concerns that the Dalai Lama mentions in part 1 of the book. All of the things, education, technology, materialism, globalization, all of the things that we talked about. Now he's going to give us some ideas. He's going to give us some answers as how we can implement any of the things that we may be interested in, if this resonates with you, into our daily lives, since we are the only ones who can make a difference with ourselves personally. So it always starts with us, right? So this is, I don't think I mentioned it, Educating the Heart Through Training the Mind. That's the name of part 2. So let's go ahead and we're going to just read a quick introduction. This is probably going to explain really what we're going to expect from this last half of the book. In the first half of this book, I offered an entirely secular basis on which to understand the importance of compassion and inner values. But understanding the need for these qualities is not enough. We must also act on this understanding. So how are we to bring this understanding and translate it into our everyday lives? How are we to become more compassionate, kinder, more forgiving, and more discerning in our behavior? It is in response to such questions that, in the remaining chapters of this book, I offer some thoughts about ways in which we can begin to educate our hearts. Many aspects of these suggestions about how to restrain our negative behavior, about how to combat our destructive emotional tendencies, how to cultivate inner values such as compassion, patience, contentment, self-discipline, and generosity, and how to develop a calm and disciplined mind through mental training, are drawn from classical Buddhist traditions, which are part of my own background, including especially that of mind training, known as Lojong in Tibetan. In my view, however, the practices presented here require no religious belief or commitment. Instead, they constitute an approach to living ethically and in harmony with others, with a deeper sense of well-being, which can be practical in a way that is independent of any specific religious or cultural perspective. My suggestions in this second part are offered in the sincere hope that they can provide help and guidance for those who want to learn to overcome their own difficulties and to lead fulfilling ethical lives oriented toward long-term benefit of both self and others. Once again, I must emphasize that these suggestions are not an instant cure for all our problems. Educating the heart takes both time and sustained effort, though I have no doubt that with sincere motivation, we can all learn kind-heartedness, and we can all benefit from it. So, Chapter 8, Ethical Mindfulness in Everyday Life. Ethics is not simply a matter of knowing. More important, it is about doing. For this reason, even the most sophisticated ethical understanding, if it is not applied in daily life, is somewhat pointless. Living ethically requires not only the conscious adoption of an ethical outlook, but also a commitment to developing and applying inner values in our daily lives. Now, regarding the question of how to put ethics into practice in everyday life, it may be helpful to consider the process as having 3 aspects or levels, each progressively more advanced and dependent for its success upon the former. As outlined in some classical Buddhist texts, these are as follows. An ethic of restraint, deliberately refraining from doing actual or potential harm to others. An ethic of virtue, actively cultivating and enhancing our positive behavior and inner values. And an ethic of altruism, dedicating our lives genuinely and selflessly to the welfare of others. To be effective, these 3 stages must be considered in relation to all our behavior. In other words, not just in relation to our outward physical actions, but also in relation to what we say and ultimately to our very thoughts and intentions. And of these levels of behavior, body, mind, and speech, the most important is the mind, as the source of everything we do and say. To concentrate our attention only on actions of body and speech would be like a doctor addressing only the symptoms of an illness rather than its underlying cause. For a treatment to be effective, it must also address the source of the problem. In view of this, the final 3 chapters are all primarily concerned with training the mind. But before moving on to the subject of educating the heart through training the mind, I should first say a few words about the importance of abandoning destructive habits of body and speech, as it is this which constitutes the first stage in the practice of ethics. The ethics of restraint. Regarding certain kinds of obviously harmful behavior, all the world's major faiths and the humanistic traditions converge. Murder, theft, and inappropriate sexual conduct, such as sexual exploitation, are by definition harmful to others. So, of course, they should be abandoned. But the ethic of restraint calls for more than this. Before we can contemplate actively benefiting others, we must first of all ensure that we do no harm, even by our actions which are not immediately violent. With regard to this principle of doing no harm, I am particularly impressed and humbled by my brothers and sisters it's spelled Jain, Jain tradition, and it's capitalized. I'm not familiar with that. Jainism, please tell me if I'm saying that wrong, Jainism, which is something like a twin religion to Buddhism, places great emphasis on the virtue of nonviolence, or ahimsa, toward all beings. For example, Jain monks go to great lengths to ensure that they do not accidentally tread on insects or harm other living beings in their everyday activities. However, the exemplary behavior of these monks and nuns is hard for all of us to emulate, even for those whose circle of primary concern is restricted to humanity rather than encompassing all sentient beings. It can be very hard not to contribute to harming others through our actions in indirect ways. Consider, for example, how rivers come to be polluted, perhaps by mining companies extracting minerals or industrial plants producing components that are crucial to the technologies we use on a daily basis. Every user of those technologies thereby is partly responsible for the pollution and thus contributes negatively to the lives of others. Unfortunately, it is perfectly possible to harm others indirectly through our actions without any intention of doing so. So realistically, I think the most important thing we can all do to minimize the harm we inflict in our everyday lives is to apply discernment in our behavior and to follow that natural sense of conscientiousness, which arises from the enhanced awareness that discernment brings us. Harm caused by nonviolent means. While harm inflicted by outward actions can normally be seen, the suffering we inflict on others with words can be more hidden, but is often no less damaging. This is particularly the case in our closest, most intimate relationships. We humans are quite sensitive, and it is easy to inflict suffering on those around us through our careless use of harsh words. We can also inflict harm with dishonesty, slander, and divisive gossip. No doubt we have all, at some time or another, felt the negative consequences of such idle talk. It undermines trust and affection and can create all kinds of unfortunate misunderstandings and enmities between people. Here, as in other areas, we need to observe the golden rule found in all of the world's ethical systems. Treat others as you would wish to be treated yourself, or do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When it comes to avoiding harmful actions of body and speech, in addition to this fundamental rule, I personally find a list of 6 principles from a text by the 2nd century Indian thinker Naharuna to be helpful. In this text, Naharuna is offering advice to an Indian monarch of the time. The 6 principles are as follows. Avoid excessive use of intoxicants. Uphold the principle of right livelihood. Ensure that one's body, speech, and mind are nonviolent. Treat others with respect. Honor those worthy of esteem, such as parents, teachers, and those who are kind. And be kind to others. In spelling out what constitutes right livelihood, Naharuna lists the following examples of a wrong approach to livelihood: trying to gain material benefits from others through pretense, using attractive words to gain things from others through deceit, praising another's possessions with the intention of trying to obtain them for oneself, forcibly taking what belongs to someone else, and extolling the qualities of what one has obtained in the past with the hope of receiving more. Most of these pertain in one form or another to being dishonest. Dishonesty destroys the foundations of others' trust and is profoundly harmful. Transparency in our dealings with others is therefore tremendously important. Many of the scandals we hear about today, notably the corruption which is observable at so many levels and in so many fields, government, the judiciary, international finance, politics, media, even international sports, are related to this issue of right livelihood. Heedfulness, mindfulness, and awareness. Just as a carpenter would not think of mending a chair without having a chisel, hammer, and saw near at hand, so too do we require a basic toolkit to help us in our daily effort to live ethically. In Buddhist tradition, this toolkit is described in terms of three interrelated factors, known as heedfulness, mindfulness, and introspective awareness. These three ideas may also be useful in a secular context. Together, they can help us retain our core values in everyday life and guide our day-to-day behavior so that it becomes more in tune with the aim of bringing benefit to self and others. The first of these, heedfulness, refers to adopting an overall stance of caution. The Tibetan term bakayo, often translated as heedfulness or conscientiousness, carries the sense of being careful and attentive. For example, if we are diagnosed as having diabetes, the doctor will advise us to be very careful with our diet. We must avoid sugar, salt, and fatty foods to keep our blood pressure and insulin in check. The doctor will warn us that if we fail to adhere to this dietary regimen, there may be serious consequences for our health. When patients care about their health, they will follow this advice and adopt an attitude of caution regarding their diet. When they are tempted to eat something they should avoid, this attitude or stance of caution will help them exercise restraint. In one classical Buddhist text, heedfulness is illustrated with a story about a man convicted of a crime, who is ordered by the king to carry a bowl of sesame oil, full to the brim, while a guard walks next to him carrying an unsheathed sword. The convict is warned that if he so much as spills a single drop of oil, he will be struck down with the sword. We can imagine how careful and vigilant the convict would be. He would have complete presence of mind and total attentiveness. The story illustrates how closely related heedfulness is to the qualities of mindfulness and awareness described below. Today, there are many secularized techniques for the development of mindfulness, and these have been shown to be effective in stress reduction and the treatment of depression. As I understand it, mindfulness is the context usually referring to gaining awareness of our own patterns of behavior, including thoughts and feelings, and learning to let go of those habits, thoughts, and emotions which are unhelpful. This seems a very worthwhile endeavor. How we might go about further developing this kind of awareness is a subject to which I will return in Chapter 9. Yet in the context of living ethically on a day-to-day basis, in my view, the most important meaning of mindfulness is recollection. In other words, mindfulness is the ability to gather oneself mentally and thereby recall one's core values and meditation. In Tibetan, the word for mindfulness, drempa, also means memory. So it suggests bringing presence of mind into everyday activities. With such recollection, we are less likely to indulge our bad habits and more likely to refrain from harmful deeds. Littering, being wasteful, and overindulging oneself are simple examples of behavior which can be improved through the application of mindfulness. Awareness means paying attention to our own behavior. It means honestly observing our behavior as it is going on, and thereby bringing it under control. By being aware of our words and actions, we guard ourselves against doing and saying things we will later regret. When we are angry, for instance, and if we fail to recognize that our anger is distorting our perception, we may say things we do not mean. So having the ability to monitor oneself, having, as it were, a second order level of attention, is of great practical use in everyday life, as it gives us greater control over our negative behavior and enables us to remain true to our deeper motives and convictions. Such awareness of our own behavior, our actions, thoughts, and words, is not something we can learn overnight. Rather, it develops gradually, and as we become more aware, we slowly gain mastery. To some readers, this mental toolkit may sound very like the advice to listen to your conscience, an idea which plays an important role in many religious approaches to the practice of ethics. And indeed, there are many similarities between the two. In some religions, conscience is regarded as a precious gift from God, which makes human beings uniquely moral creatures. From a secular perspective, we may understand conscience as a product of our biological nature as social animals, or as something we acquire from society through our upbringing and environment. Either way, all sane and responsible people will surely agree that this quality is of great significance with respect to our moral sensibility. Whatever one's views about religion, the idea of a person devoid of conscience, without any inner voice of restraint or moral responsibility, is truly frightening. Practicing awareness is not quite the same as listening to your conscience. However, in Buddhist ethical theory, there is no idea of the conscience as a distinct mental faculty, but being conscientious is still very important. It is described in terms of two key mental qualities, namely self-respect and consideration of others. The first of these, self-respect, relates to having a sense of personal integrity, a self-image as a person who upholds certain values. So when we are tempted to indulge in harmful behavior, our self-image acts as a restraint, as we think this is unbecoming of me. The second mental quality, consideration of others, pertains to having a healthy regard for others' opinions, especially for their potential disapproval. Together, these two factors give us an added level of caution about doing wrong, which can strengthen our moral compass. Let me just take a look and see what I have left here, because I accidentally read a really long, I think will be good to read this in one. The Ethics of Virtue. If through mindfulness, awareness, and heedfulness, we can manage to refrain from harming others in our everyday actions and words, we can start to give more serious attention to actively doing good. And this can be a source of great joy and inner confidence. We can benefit others through our actions by being warm and generous toward them, by being charitable, and by helping those in need. Therefore, when misfortune befalls others or they make mistakes, rather than responding with ridicule or blame, we must reach out and help them. Benefiting others through our speech includes praising others, listening to their problems, and offering them advice and encouragement. To help us bring benefit to others through our words and actions, it is useful to cultivate an attitude of sympathetic joy in others' achievements and good fortune. This attitude is a powerful antidote against envy, which is not only a source of unnecessary suffering on the individual level, but also an obstacle to our ability to reach out and engage with others. Tibetan teachers often say that such sympathetic joy is the least costly way of promoting one's own virtues. The Ethic of Altruism. Altruism is a genuinely selfless dedication of one's actions and words to the benefit of others. All the world's religious traditions recognize this as the highest form of ethical practice, and in many, it is seen as the main avenue to liberation or to unity with God. But though a complete and selfless dedication to others is the highest form of ethical practice, this does not mean that altruism cannot be undertaken by anyone. In fact, many people in caring professions such as social work and healthcare, and also those in teaching, are involved in the pursuit of this third level of ethics. Such professions, which bring direct benefit to the lives of so many, are truly noble. Yet there are countless other ways in which ordinary people can and do lead lives which benefit others. What is required is simply that we make serving others a priority. An important part of serving others is using discernment to assess the likely consequences of our own actions. Then, by being heedful, mindful, and attentive in our everyday lives, we will begin to gain mastery over our actions and words. This is the very foundation of freedom, and it is through gaining such self-mastery and using it to ensure that our actions are non-harmful at every level that we can start to actively work for the benefit of others. All right, so that completes chapter 8. Next, chapter 9, we will be talking about dealing with destructive emotions. That's a really big one. So we will stop right there. I'm going to get ready for bed now. I'm actually already almost there. It's pretty late here, but I wanted to hop on and read this to you since I was going to read it to myself. I just kind of felt like making a video for you guys and reading this next chapter. So until next time, as always, please take care of yourself. Please take care of those around you. I will see you again very soon for chapter 8 in Beyond Religion. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.